Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, I have a special guest. He has a fantastic first name. Also, Matt Morrisson, he goes by. He is a host. He's also a podcast host, so we have a few similarities. And he is currently the host of Crazy Day, Enjoy the Ride. He also has a very entertaining, informative, and all-around great TikTok channel as well. It's called Wood in Spirit. His name is Matthew Morrisson. Matthew, how are you today?
Doing fantastic, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, looking forward to this interview. We met in Kyle Cease's community, which is the Absolutely Everything Pass, Evolving Out Loud. So we have that in common. We'd hopped on a call not too long ago, just doing some manifestation techniques and such, which was a really cool thing to do. And really cool to have you on. I want to get into the podcast, but before we do, let's get a little bit more about who Matthew Morrisson is. I'd love to hear a little bit about your origin story, just from reading and listening to a couple of your episodes and reading your bio. Man, you've worn a lot of hats over your time here on planet Earth. A little bit about yourself. I'll give you an open forum and just take it for as wherever you want to go with it, and I'm sure we'll go off on a few tangents along the way.
I've been known to do a couple of tangents here or there. So, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It was an honor to have somebody ask me to have him on. So that, or to have me on rather. So that was I've been looking forward to this for a while. So
awesome.
Let's see. I was born at a very young age. So I was born in Maryland, grew up on the East Coast of the USA, and as a kid, I had a couple of things that I kind of said I wanted to do, but I never really knew what I wanted to do, or really, knew what I wanted to do. I kind of had the ideas about being an astronaut, and I'm old enough to know when the Challenger blew up, and all of a sudden that dream sort of blew up with it. And somewhere along the way, I was told that God had a plan for my life. And I have also sort of always dealt with a bit of anxiety. And, when you're told that there's a thing out there for you, like a definite purpose, like there's a thing that it's a defined plan thing, and you don't know what it is, and you've got a little anxiety or a lot, it kind of paralyzes you because you don't know what it is, and you sure as heck don't want to do the wrong thing. And that kind of sent me down a long path of not wanting to do anything because you didn't know what the thing was to do,
Yeah, sure.
Right. I spent a lot of time trying to find it, and went down the path of joining some organizations that claimed they were going to help me figure out what it was and help me find it. And it seemed like a lot of other people were finding it and I wasn't. And that was really frustrating, especially when it seemed like it was possible to find it and somehow I wasn't finding it. And so that led me to believe that I was somehow to blame, for all of that, because you could see evidence of other people claiming to find it and they didn't. And so, I, not knowing really what to do, I just said, I'll become a jack of all trades. That because it seemed to me to be enjoyable to just know a little bit of everything and try a little bit of everything and do a little bit of everything. And so I just explored. I've always been kind of a curious guy. And so, you do the kind of the obligatory jobs like food service and retail and those types of things, because, those are out there. Did those things. I worked for a youth ministry for a time. That was where I, went to try to find my purpose. And they had an interesting internship program where you would go and work for them and go through some of their programs. It was a year-long program that I extended to a second year. And despite having my life taking me in a different path than probably they thought it was going to take me, I did have some really interesting experiences there where I ran a whole shipping and receiving department and learned how to drive a forklift, and then traveled the nation running a convention on a bus, setting up a show every day or every weekend, and in a different city of the United States, and even went to Canada once or twice. And,
cool.
Just by the time I was 18 years old, I'd had a whole lot of experiences that I didn't think I was going to have. Did a lot, saw a lot. and just that kind of fostered that fuel for curiosity,
Yeah.
had some interesting life experiences by the time I was 18. I'd
That's
always
funny.
said I was gonna, yeah,
I'll just interject right now. Like when you're
yeah,
when you're saying all these different things that you're doing,
yeah.
and then you're like, yeah, and that was before I was 18. I'm like,
Or
okay,
maybe I was 19. I
right.
don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
I don't
18
know.
and a half, we'll say. We'll split the difference.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
I'm like, my goodness, that's already quite an extensive
yeah,
life experience, especially for being at that age. I remember myself, for me, worked the same job for 23 years. So hearing that you tried on all these different things that early on, like you say, it very much sets the tone. I just wanted to hop in
yeah,
there because I was like, okay, whoa, you're 18 at this point. I'm fast forwarded way ahead. So I just wanted to
yeah.
summarize it at that point.
Yeah, maybe it was 19 or 20. I mean, I guess I left for that after high school. So,
Sure,
by the time I was 20, I guess. But
sure,
at that point, who cares? I mean, you still feel like a
exactly.
kid at that point.
Yeah, 100%.
And so, um, you know, moved out of my parents' house, wound up joining the army. Long story there, but wound up joining the Army Reserves. Trained up as a land surveyor there, mainly because nobody knew what a land surveyor was in my family, and I didn't know what a surveyor was. And then the Army offers me that job, and I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, um, Land surveying was this job that like everybody could tell me what one was, but nobody could tell me what one did. And I was fascinated at this job. Like, when you're a kid, you're driving, you see these guys looking through the instrument, or a guy holding a stick by the highway. And I was like, Mom, what's that guy? Oh, he's a surveyor. But what's he doing? I don't know.
Surveying
like,
stuff. Yeah.
and it wasn't like I had this like hyper fixation on surveyors, but I can just remember these maybe a handful of times as a kid, just periodically seeing a guy and asking about him, and everybody could say what they were and no one could say what they did. What was the guy looking at, and what was the guy doing, and what was the stick for, and whatever. And it was like everybody knew him and nobody knew what they did. And there was this like fascination I had as a kid. And so, you go and join the Army and you take all the little tests, and based on your scores, like, oh, well, you're qualified for, whatever. And one of the things they said was, technical engineer specialist, which of course, the Army can't say surveyor. And I said, well, what's that? And they read off all of the things. And one of the things was surveying. I'm like, sign me up. And they're like, do you know what that is? I'm like, no, Sergeant. And I remember, going through basic training. You go to basic and you get all the different, everyone's all lumped into the same basic because everyone goes through basic training. And the drill sergeants would be, what's your job? Oh, I'm going to be a truck driver. Oh, that'll be great. What's your job? Oh, I'm going to, be a medic, or I'm going to pack parachutes, whatever. Everyone's got their thing. Okay, cool. And then, and of course, everyone's rattling it off by the letter number designation that the Army gives it, And of course, the drill sergeants know what almost all of these things are, especially the common ones. And they get to me, what are you going to be? 51 Tango. What the hell is that? And that was the answer I got every time I ever called it back, because apparently I discovered later there was only like 1,000 of them in the entire Army. So it wasn't common, So wound up doing that for like 5 years, in Texas, did a lot of boundary surveys. So got to explore the back 40 of thing over there. Got deployed to Iraq for a year, so I got a all expenses paid tour, or a paid vacation to the desert and sandbox, and got to hang out over there for a bit.
The sandbox.
Whatever you are thinking in your head right now, or whatever your listeners are thinking in your head, just it's not that. It was way more boring than what anybody is thinking right now. I went there with 210 rounds and came back with 209, and that one round was not spent in any way that was exciting.
Wow. Okay.
I was a land surveyor, dude. My unit had steamrollers and bulldozers and motor graders, and we did exactly what a steamroller and a bulldozer and a motor grader should do.
Yes.
We moved dirt, we brought dirt in, or we took dirt out, or we made dirt wet, or we made dirt dry, or we made it hard, or we made it soft, or And I mean, not that there wasn't risk and whatever, and not that there weren't some scary moments, but we were horizontal construction.
There we go. Yeah.
We just dug holes or we filled holes in, and anyway, took a year after that to try my hand in finance. A buddy of mine was making some stupid money selling bonds, investments in South Florida. And, I'd been gone for a year, so that kind of softens a lot of relationships and whatever. And surveying was fun, but it wasn't paying much, and you're gone for a year, relationships kind of soften a little bit. And opportunity came up. We took it. I didn't even know what a bond was, but, got my certification to sell them, which I guess kudos for me for passing the test, but I didn't have any right trying to sell those things, a bunch of cold calling, and I didn't like it. And so a year later, we left Florida, moved to Indiana. We were pregnant with our second one. Well, not me, but my wife was. And went back into surveying, just got back into more retail, food service, things like that. Surveying fell through, found roofing. And I remember the first thing that somebody told me when I got into roofing sales was, Matt, nobody grows up wanting to be a roofer. And I have found that to be about 99% true. He said, no one grows up wanting to be a roofer, but those of us that are in roofing just accidentally found ourselves that way, or found ourselves in this trade. And I say 99% because there's about 1% that did. They're a special bunch. They grew up, their dad was a roofer, come home from school when they were 14 and go out and help their dad sling shingles or whatever it is. And those guys love it. And I love it when you meet those guys because, they're a little bit off. Like everybody who's passionate about something can be off in their own special way, But, most people are just there because they found it. Did that for a couple of years and wound up picking up a piece of software built for roofers. And long story short, wound up working for that software company. And that's where I've been for the last 9 years.
Wow.
No, 10 years.
10 years.
10 years.
Wow.
So that's my story from an employment background. I always said I kind of wanted to be a jack of all trades and learn a little bit of everything. And in part, that was because I didn't know what I wanted to do. That entire time I was filling myself with a lot of self-abuse and depression because I'm sitting there going, well, God's never told me what to do. I'll just do this, but I don't know if it's what I'm supposed to do. I'll go there because I don't know if it's where I'm supposed to be. I don't know if it's my purpose. I don't know if it's my destiny. All my friends have a plan and a purpose and a destiny and a place to be, and they've got a 3-year and a 5-year and a 10-year plan. And I'm just going here because I'm desperate. I got to pay the bills. And, about 6 years ago, a lot of things changed, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But, when I looked back, I realized there was this theme to all of these jobs. Surveying, finance, food service, retail, roofing, software. And that was, I didn't plan any of them. I didn't plan any of those things.
Right.
But I found something to love in all of them, right? Besides surveying, which really was just this fascination of a mystery, there's a mysterious enigma here, but really I didn't even know what it was, I just found something to love, right? Do you know who Mike Rowe is, the guy who made that show Dirty Jobs for years?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
He had this saying, and I'm butchering or paraphrasing depending on your perspective, that he talked about not following your passion but letting your passion follow you.
Okay.
And of course, obviously, if you're super interested in the thing and that's what you want to pursue, I don't think he would fault you for it. But I think there's something also to be said for, if your job is, a trash man. I guess if you're passionate about taking the trash out, then more power to you. But, if your job is taking out the trash or, driving a trash truck, can you bring what you uniquely possess to that job? Right. How many times have you met somebody who's just crazy passionate or just has that X factor in whatever they're doing, whether they're pouring coffee or taking the trash out, or they're the janitor at your school, or whatever? They're probably not passionate about being the janitor, but they're passionate at their job.
Right.
And I found something to love there, right? And oftentimes it was helping other people, it was training, it was teaching people, or showing them a way to do the job better, or showing them something to love about the job. And that seemed to be an overarching theme as I was looking back lately, was the job was one thing, but I found ways to make the job better. I found ways to make the job more efficient, or I found ways to improve processes or operations, and then help other people, help coworkers, or new hires that came on after me, or things like that.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
When did you, excuse me, when did you realize that pattern or that overarching? Like, when was there a specific aha moment? You're like, okay, like
That
just
was
what
really
just
just a
what you
couple of years
verbalized.
ago, man.
Yeah, interesting.
Last couple of years have been a lot of just introspection and soul searching. And I've been doing a lot more meditation lately, and a lot of talking with myself. Not talking to myself, but just thinking things, journaling things out, looking for patterns, recognizing that there even are patterns to my life.
Yeah.
Just looking back at things and saying, maybe there was something to all of these things that I thought were pointless. For all of these things that maybe I wasn't, just some awful person that, was, hated and abused and ignored all those years. Um, like I said, about 6 years ago, um, I had this moment. It was October 5th or 6th in 2015. I had been flying about once a week for about 4 or 5 weeks, and I have this routine where if I get to the airport early, I'll go to the bookstore and just kind of browse the books and see if a book jumps off the shelf at me. I'm rarely looking for anything in particular, just if anything is interesting. Sometimes it's just your favorite author. Oh, they've got a new book that I didn't realize, whatever, and you pick it up. But sometimes I'm just looking to see if something jumps off the shelf, almost literally sometimes. And I'm almost never regretting those purchases, even if it's a book I've never heard of, an author I've never heard of, or whatever. And there was a book that did. It was this book.
Okay.
This book jumps off the shelf at me maybe like the last week of August. And it scared me a little bit. And I'm all like, nah. She's talking like meditation on the back. And I'm still kind of heavily involved in the church and some of my spiritual background that I've been involved with, even though it was sort of becoming a shaky foundation. But some of the stuff that she's talking about had been things that I had been told were bad and wrong and whatever. So I put this book back. I'm like, no, that book just jumped off the shelf of me because it's like neon yellow.
Yeah.
Whatever. So I put it back. Next week, I'm at the airport and I walk through and the thing is like smacking me in the face. And I pick it up again. I'm all like, maybe I'll get it this time. I'm all like, nah, it's got the word badass on the front. It's kind of funny. And I put it back. I did that like 4 or 5 more times. And finally, about the 5th time, I'm like, all right, screw it. I'm going to make this book shut up. I'm going to pick up this book and I'm probably going to hate it. I always fall asleep whenever I get self-help books. They're always boring. I've got a 5-hour or 4-hour flight and I don't want to get a book and I'm going to fall asleep and then not have a book to read. So I'm going to get this book and I'm going to get some bubblegum pop culture book, that I knew I was going to like anyway. So I'm going to buy 2 books, a backup book, so that when this book sucks, I'll have the other one to read.
Yeah.
And dude, I have never had a book just have almost a physical, visceral reaction ever. And I don't think there's necessarily anything special about the book, except that it was the right book for me at that time in my life. I mean, it's a great book. Don't get me wrong. But it was just, it woke something up in me at that time, right? The subtitle is How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life, and I mean, it seems kind of cliche or whatever. And, I've since read it now and I'm like, it's all right, whatever. It seems kind of basic to me, now, but at that moment, it was like what I needed. And it was just like, it was like my eyeballs were like snapping to like words on the page and sentences.
Yeah.
I couldn't like pry my eyes off of lines and paragraphs and quotes and phrases and concepts. And I remember like one of the first things I saw in there was like, our fantasies are our realities in an excuse-free world. And it was just like, I couldn't stop reading the sentence over and over and over again, and then like,
it's profound.
and then like she'd be like, holding on to resentment is like taking poison and waiting for your enemies to die. And I'm all like,
Sure.
why can I, oh my God, what, and it was just like, and these things are, if you've swam in spiritual circles or self-help circles, these are not like new ideas, but for whatever reason, they were just like stabbing me in the heart the entire plane ride to California,
Yeah.
And there was this moment where I realized, there was just something about this woman, and she was talking about loving people and being compassionate for people. And, my background had been growing up in the church, especially, or at least the way that I had internalized it, was to believe that human beings were flawed and awful and lost. And, the flavor of the church that I grew up in was that they were, damned and deserving of a savior. And the only reason to love them was because, you needed to show them the love of God. And I'm just like, that never made sense to me. And that was always this dissonance that I couldn't connect with,
Yeah.
And in reading this woman who was not of the faith that I had grown up in, talking about loving people and having compassion and forgiving people. And in this moment where I'm like, she is saying all the things that I had been told were these high values, and yet her faith is the faith that I was told was supposed to be evil. And there was this moment of, hang on, what if everything that I've believed all my life is not quite right?
Yeah, like paradigm shifting, right?
What else could be wrong? What else could be wrong? What if I just for a moment said, what if? And said, what happens? And I realized, I was like, what if I don't suck? I mean, what if the last 30 years of not hearing answers isn't because I suck? What if it's because I've been doing, what if it's because I don't know,
Sure,
and I just kind of started exploring things that I had never been allowed to explore, and all of a sudden, everything that didn't make sense started to make sense.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Very
interesting.
I started to be able to look at people differently. I was like, what if we're all beautiful? What if we're all amazing and not damned and wretched and awful? What if everyone's got something to offer and not, in need of something? Instead, we're all amazing and great. And all it took was just a perspective shift.
Pretty big perspective shift, man.
And it was, I don't know what it was. I'm not claiming to be anything special, but it was like, I've since read of this concept in Zen or in Buddhism called Satori, like an awakening moment, And I don't know if what I had was that, but it feels like it, where it's like there's just this moment of like, I got it. You can't put into words. It just felt like a physical, guttural smack in the soul, and you can't go back, and you also can't explain it to somebody who's not there. But if you're there, you also don't have to say much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
wow. I could see I think there's going to be a lot of people that can relate to having something that just all of a sudden clicks, right? That is profound though, especially for that, you having that all that period of time where you've had this certain mindset and it's been conditioned into you to be able to essentially have a 180, almost called the opposite way, or at least be open to the fact that there could be the opposite way. Is pretty big. By the way, we just for the folks listening at home, they're like, can you just say the name of the book?
I'm sorry.
You were a badass. I wanted to
yes, I'm sorry. The book's called
right?
the book's called You Are a Badass.
Yeah.
It's by an author called Jen Sincero, Sincero.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's so funny. I'm on video. I totally forgot there's an audio.
All good. It was I could have interjected, but I didn't want to wreck the flow. And plus, I'm like, oh, this will leave some delightful tension into the. They're like, come on, just say it.
Yeah.
So purposely left that in there for some dramatic purpose. And the funniest part was that you actually read the subtitle. So I'm like, okay, so maybe somebody will Google that when they're like, come on, I need to know what this book is, especially with how profound of a shift it created in you. So having some fun. Anyways, you did touch a little bit on. Yeah, I believe you had it in some of the information that you sent over to me, and it's a quote that I really love too, and I use it to remind myself at times, about life events and such. And it's a Wayne Dyer quote, and I might paraphrase it or butcher it, same as you've mentioned, is depending on perspective. So when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yeah,
I know that's a big quote for you, and I guess what better time to bring that up than in this time of the interview. So. Yeah, is that in fact, was that the Wayne Dyer quote? Is that are you a fan of Wayne Dyer? Like is that just sort of a paraphrase that you'd heard before? Yeah, like let's just get into that whole. I'll let you pick it up from where you are in the story here with that in mind.
Yeah. So Wayne Dyer was somebody that I found maybe about a year after the events here. Maybe a year. Thereabouts, about a year. There were all sorts of things that I just, once I freed myself, or I say freed myself, allowed myself to just say, okay, let me just explore. I mean, things that I just had not allowed myself to explore before. I'm not going to say accept, because sometimes I'm like, this doesn't, I don't know, this doesn't click. This doesn't make sense, but that makes sense, right? This doesn't light my soul on fire, but that does, But there were things that I just always said, well, I'm not allowed to read this, and well, that's going to be bad, and that's evil, and oh, I know that name's bad, whatever, right? Wayne Dyer was somebody that I had been introduced to by somebody, and or was recommended, I guess. And I picked up, I think I picked up his book, Excuses Be Gone. I think that's the first one that I picked up. And then I picked up the second one may have been his book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, which is his series of essays on the Tao Te Ching.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't remember if that's the second one, but that certainly is the one that I have read the most. Anyway, in one of his books, or maybe it's one of his audio pieces, but anyway, he has that quote: when you change the way you look at things, the way you look at things, or the things you look at change. And I think one of the reasons I love that, besides just kind of the creative wording of it all, is it sort of embodies the effect that I had from You Are a Badass and so many of the other things, which was just, it was a perspective shift for me, right? I mean, so much of the stuff that came from that was just, what if I don't suck? Right? What if people aren't inherently awful and flawed and damned and wretched and and needing to be all the ways again that I had internalized things, and the so much of, even when I talk to my friends that are still of the faith that I grew up in, right, they would even look at if we have a relationship where we can talk frankly about where I'm at today, they might even say that, they might not agree with the conclusions that I came to, but I'm like, that's fine. But 2 and 2 in my head, that's the answer that my brain comes up to, right? That was the way that my brain came out. That's the answer I come up with, right? Mm-hmm. That's my perspective. And it took a perspective shift for me to come out of some of this depression that led me to some of these suicidal thoughts, frankly, that stuff led me to, because for me, if 30 years of all of this, doing all of this stuff that I'd been told leads to not the right outcome, then the only thing I could think of is that I'm at fault, that I'm flawed, that I'm broken. That's what my brain goes to, right? And this perspective shift was huge in my turning, right? And my seeing the value in myself and help and the value in others, and then having this desire to help others see the value in themselves and trying to do whatever I can in that, and just choosing to look at things differently and seeing the power in looking at things differently. That doesn't always mean that, if you're going through awful things, that you're not going through awful things, but you can choose to change how you're looking at those things sometimes, right? I mean, if your arm is broken, no, it's not like you can just say, oh, look, my arm's not broken, and your arm won't be broken, but you can choose how are you choosing to experience the fact that your arm is broken, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to belittle anybody that has an injury or a sickness or a disability, or, you're going through some tragic aspect of your life. But I also know that, um, you know, as an example, a couple of weeks ago, I got laid out for a day with a migraine. No amount of changing my perspective was going to change the fact that I had a migraine and that I was laid out and I was nauseous and I was throwing up and I basically was out for the day. It sucked. Mm-hmm. So, no, my perspective isn't going to change that, but my perspective could change how I am thinking about the fact that I'm laying there with a migraine. Right?
Yeah.
Is it, oh, woe is me, and oh, this sucks, and oh, I hate this, and oh, I'm miserable? I mean, it could, and that would be valid, and that would be fair, and there would be nothing wrong and nothing to judge about that. But I could also say, well, I've got an opportunity to rest for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have an opportunity to be quiet, and maybe I can read, or maybe I can look at this as the universe giving me a sign that I've been working too hard, or whatever, right? It's like, it doesn't change the fact that I'm laid up. It doesn't change the fact that I've got a headache, and I'm not belittling that, but my perspective change can help me move from I'm miserable to maybe there's an opportunity here, right?
Yeah.
And so that whole concept of when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, is just, for me at least, is a powerful way to help me and maybe help me help somebody else, depending on the situation, depending on the person and the opportunity.
You mentioned that a few times now. It's how important it is to you, to be able to help other people. Yeah. So again, when you're talking about these overarching, themes that have showed up in your life, why is that important for you? I mean, is there a tie in to some of the, the mental health issues that you've been open with about yourself, that you can perhaps see in other people and alleviating that? Like, what is that, just part of your nature? Like, where is this sort of the origin of the desire to help others? Where does it come from with you?
It's something I'm still kind of exploring, like the origins from, like that, maybe the motivations. It's certainly been something that's always been a part of me, right? Mm-hmm. I think maybe I think there's probably a people pleasing component to it that I'm still trying to explore. I feel a little bit, maybe you're looking for validation. I'm trying to notice some of these things in the last year or two. But even as in my younger years, right, there was something I was always just doing that, right? I would find maybe a slightly better way to do things, or a faster way, or a more efficient way. And then you've got somebody that joins the company that you're working for, and you're like, oh, here, let me help you out. That just made sense to me.
Yeah, sure.
I remember when I worked in food service, right? So, it made sense. So I worked in food service when I was in my 30s. Most of my coworkers were late teens, early 20s, right? Yeah. Nobody wanted the training shift, right? So because, and of course, most of your coworkers are in their late teens, early 20s. They're college kids, high school kids, whatever it is, right? Nobody wants that. And like you'd hear them go, oh God, I've got to have the tag along, on a busy Friday night. I'm
Yeah.
already going to be busy. I'm
Yeah.
already going to, I don't want the new guy,
Yeah.
new girl, whatever. And I'm sitting there going, I mean, maybe it was the fact that I'm in my 30s. Maybe it's my personality, but it was just, that didn't make sense to me. I mean, I've always been kind of the guy that a lot of things didn't make sense to, and sometimes maybe to my own detriment. Like things don't make sense to me that make sense to everybody else. But sometimes maybe that's to my own benefit because I look at things differently as well. And I'm sitting here going, there was two things about that didn't make sense to me. One, dude, if it's a busy Friday, why don't I want a slave? I mean, I'm saying that facetiously, obviously, but why don't I want a guy who's going to follow me around and pick up my empty iced tea cups?
Yeah.
I mean, if bare minimum, why don't I want that guy?
Right.
Right. I mean, if he does nothing else, right? If you're following me around ostensibly, quote unquote, to train, and all I get, if I am the worst trainer and all I get you to do is bust my tables, why don't I want you?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
On the flip side, you're about to be my, to use an army term, my battle buddy, meaning food service. If you've ever waited tables, ran a bar, anything like that on a busy Friday night, it is not all that different from the army, right? Foxhole, I mean, like it is practically like war. You are getting attacked and assaulted, and you are getting, people hitting you from every direction. You got you got to run this and pick this up. And then all of a sudden someone's Coke spills and that steak came out wrong. And, you're getting 3 tables all sat at one time. And it's like, you want somebody on your left and on your right who's got your back, right? Who you can turn to and say, hey, dude, can you grab that strawberry lemonade? I can't get it. Right, dude, can you refill that Coke? Can you run that Coke out while you're running your Coke out? I can't run it. And they'll say, I got you. Right. So why wouldn't I want to train somebody in a way, to think in a way, to act in a way, to consider the guest and their coworker in a way? Because in a week or two, you're going to be to my left or to my right. So why would I want to train you like a douche so that you're going to turn into a douche? Instead, why wouldn't I want to train you to think selflessly, to think like a battle buddy, to think like a soldier, to think like a coworker that I'm going to want to work next to? I mean, why wouldn't I want to do that?
Makes perfect sense.
Right?
Makes perfect sense.
So,
when you make it,
so I asked to train him, bring him on, let's go. So I don't know, that always just made sense to me. Right. Sure. And moving into in the last, 5 or 6 years, it's like I kept bumping into people that I was like, I could see, wow, you have some amazing personality trait. You have some amazing skill. You have some amazing gift. You have some amazing heart. You have some amazing compassion. And then you'd be like, but I suck. I'm like, but you don't. God, you don't. You care. You love, you just got your heart beat up by that customer, but that's because you care. It's not a weakness, that's a strength. Nobody else here cares. You do. Can you not see that's a strength?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You are an asset here. That's not a weakness. Don't close your heart up, right? Yeah. You're tired right now, but that's because you worked an extra shift, but that's because you care, or whatever it is, right? And it was like people would see their strengths as a weakness because it would hurt sometimes, or whatever it was, right? And it would seem like, or they would sit there and belittle themselves, or they would not recognize that something that, they would belittle their customer, or because the customer had an emotion. It's like, and the customer had a bad day. And it's like, but we can also learn to speak compassionately about them instead and recognize they're a human being like we're a human being, right? And it was just like learning to look at things differently as opposed to just saying, that customer sucks. Yep, all customers suck.
Default, right?
Shifting a perspective. Right? You had a bad day. They're having a bad day. We can help them have a better day by recognizing that they're having a bad day. And instead of just lashing back at them, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
hanging up the phone with, man, they suck, and man, they suck, and man, and then answering the next call with negativity and just
Sure.
feeding that into it.
Feeding into it.
Instead, we can say, we can answer the phone with positivity. We can
Yeah.
respond with compassion. And those things just, I don't know, it just made sense to start adding positivity into it and recognizing that and help people recognize that and feed in their own greatness. I don't know. It's morphed
Yeah.
into more of a, I don't know, it's morphed, I guess.
Yeah. Well, speaking of morphine and, taking on a new,
Yeah.
again, the jack of all trades theme and
Yeah.
such,
Yeah.
you started this podcast, and I do want to, as anybody that's watching the video, you're currently in your shop, and I want to get into that.
Yeah.
But before we do, felt like a good segue into your podcasting. So
Yeah.
crazy day, enjoy the ride.
Yep.
What was the final, push or nudge or tap on the shoulder, whatever you needed to get this going? From what I gather, like there had been a sort of a theme of people kind of going, hey, you'd be a great podcast host, such.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where was the final nudge? What was the final thing, sign or whatever it may have been that you needed to start this show, and how has it been going so far?
Yeah. So my podcast called Crazy Day, and I've been thinking about it for a while. People had suggested it for one reason or another. And back in September, I kind of just got this. I've been doing some of this manifestation stuff that you had alluded to at the very beginning of this call with somebody. And like, as I was kind of talking in sort of a trying not to think as I was talking, if what came out was, we were sort of doing this like visualization thing. What came out of my mouth was, and then I did a podcast, and I'm like, hold the phone. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
It was something that I had toyed around with in my head for a while, but I'd always had this like, well, I don't know what I would call it, and I don't know what I would do, and I don't know how I would publish it, and I don't know, there was all these things, anxiety again. And I tend to overthink, or in my pattern at least, it tends to overthink a lot of things and want to be a lot of perfectionism and things like that. And so I kind of said, you know what, let's go ahead and do this thing. So long as I can have no expectations. Because where I had gotten hung up on this and some other things that I had tried or started to do in the past was always these expectations around whatever the idea was. Well, okay, I can start, but then what do I do when I get 100 followers or 1,000,000 followers, or how do I monetize it, or what's my website going to, I'm always thinking like all these things way out, and and I would just spiral into overwhelm, and then nothing happens. And I said, you know what? First of all, let me acknowledge the anxiety as opposed to ignoring it or pushing through it or shoving it away or whatever. Let me acknowledge it and say, yeah, it's valid. And I see it and I hear it and I acknowledge it and whatever. And then say, as long as I can have no expectations on this thing, zero. Like if I don't publish it, okay. If I publish one episode and never another one, okay. If one person hears it, okay. And if 1,000,000 people hear it, okay. And if anywhere in between, and so I just started. If you listen to the first episode, you'll hear me say, and I don't know how I'm going to publish this episode. And honestly, I almost didn't know what the episode was until the name of the podcast was going to be, until it came out of my mouth. Like, amazing. There was some doubt until the word came out of my mouth. And so right now it is a monologue format. I script something out and then read it, where I'll still sort of ad-lib it a little bit with some, what I just generally call musings, because I don't know what else to call them. Some thoughts on a topic or a concept. The term Crazy Day, I'll let you listen to episode 1 to get the full story of it, but it's a take on something from my childhood. My mom kind of used it as a way to help me learn about chasing my own curiosity. So it's a way to kind of explore things that I'm curious about, or that interest me, or that stand out to me in one way, shape, or form. But it also gives me some freedom to change the style of the podcast up at some point. So I might change it up. I have some ideas at some point to do maybe an interview style, sort of like this, maybe. But right now it's a monologue. And at least for the next little bit, that's what it's going to be. But outside of that, I have no expectations, and that's part of the fun. And it's been going well.
Great.
It's been going well. I've gotten lots of positive feedback. I get these little emails in my inbox going, "You're number 146 in personal journals in Canada." I guess Canada likes me.
There you go. Yeah,
um,
exactly. Yeah,
that's the classification I put myself under. So
very
it's been
cool.
going well, and I've got, I don't know, at least another 6 or 7 ready to go. So it's
Excellent.
exciting. I'm just
Yeah,
having fun with it. As long as I'm having fun with it, I'm going to keep doing it, and as long as there's no expectations,
I was gonna
you
say,
know.
yeah, those are like your two ground rules, right? You gotta
Yeah.
have fun and no expectations, and it's a great words of wisdom for really any pursuit, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and speaking of final pursuit, we'll wind things down here. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to give you a chance though to plug your TikTok channel. I really
Yeah.
like, and again, I'm perhaps putting words in your mouth, but just your TikTok channel is fairly eclectic, like just sort of
Yeah.
almost like an open mic feel where you can sort of, yeah, I get the impression you feel like if you feel like just whatever's on your mind, right? If you want to talk about something that's a little more like spiritual or personal development, or if you want to actually physically show some of the woodworking that you're working on,
Yeah.
which is always amazing, some of the older tools that you have, and
Yeah.
ultimately, like I got the impression just from like seeing how extensive your workshop is behind you, that this has been a passion, your entire life passed down from your dad or something like this, right? But meanwhile, it's a 2016, if I'm not if I'm not mistaken, is when you got into woodworking. So
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit about the TikTok channel, and yeah, and a little bit about your woodworking.
Yeah. So, part of my journey after that time in 2015 was I started exploring creativity, my own, which was not something I had ever even thought I was or had, let alone explored. And that led me into woodworking. I started woodworking in September of 2016. And that was mainly because my dad had given me some tools and I didn't have a bench to work on. And so it was strictly well, it would make sense to have a table to work on. I don't know. I guess I'll go build a table. So I found some plans and didn't know what I was doing and built one. And that just kind of was like an addiction. It just started like I had never done anything. I hung a painting on the wall or something, but that was it.
Yeah.
And what I realized was, I've sort of alluded to it, but I've lived with depression, my entire life. Didn't know how to manage it besides just ignoring it and playing video games,
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
And um, the, hitting that, building that table was just like, I mean, I know you have a lot of your podcast and your story is around addiction and whatever. I remember the first time I ever took a drag on a cigarette, my brain did something different, you know, and I eventually kicked that habit, and that's the closest thing that I've ever had to a chemical addiction. And I
Mm.
imagine, I don't share your story, but I imagine there's some similarity. But it was just like there was this moment where I'm like, oh yeah, that
Yeah,
was my
of
first
course.
moment of like my brain going, oh, 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 you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and I just wanted to build more things,
Mm.
and so it has been in my family, but I had never, there was nothing in my family had ever really passed on to me, really. Or so I got into woodworking and just really just started doing exploring things. And at the beginning of this year, 2022, as we're recording this, I started a TikTok called Wood and Spirit. It's all one word if you're on TikTok. And the thinking there was, you know, just talk woodworking, whatever interests me. Yeah, I've got some tools. I enjoy restoring old tools like old hand planes, and I've got an old drill press from the 40s that I'm going to fix up at some point. So I'll probably
So
show that
cool.
off whenever that hits my workbench.
Yeah.
And then of course whatever projects that I'm working on, that kind of thing. But I wanted to be able to insert um, what I call spirituality with a lowercase s into the conversation.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah.
Um, a lot of woodworkers struggle with depression. Um,
Hmm.
a lot of
Interesting.
them are by themselves, right? A
Yeah,
lot of them
sure.
use woodworking. If we're not talking about guys that are doing it professionally, I mean,
Sure.
sometimes that is also the case. But if we're
Sure.
talking guys like me and ladies for that matter, that are just doing it on the weekends, hobbyists, maybe take a commission here and there. A lot of them are doing it for the creativity, and you'll hear them if they're ever talking honestly and vulnerably for mental health, to
Mm.
manage their depression, to
Hmm.
quiet the voices, not no, not like schizophrenia, but just like to calm
Yeah.
and to calm
Yeah.
the demons, as it were, you know?
Wow.
And there's, when once you start talking about it, they'll start talking about it. But not too many people start talking about it,
Right. Yeah.
you know?
Huh.
And so I wanted to be able to just say, hi, I'm Matt. I'm a woodworker too. Oh, yeah. you know, and then just to slip these things in. So yeah, if you were to
Cool,
go to
man.
my channel, it's not all mental health stuff.
Sure.
It's hand planes and chisels and scroll saws and table saws and tips. And then, oh
Yeah.
yeah, some depression stuff and some mental health stuff and back to hand planes and hammers and screwdrivers and whatever. And then, oh yeah, here's the stuff here. Let's have a talk about this and, slip some things in here and just, bring them in and say, look, I'm just a guy and let's
Mhm.
be vulnerable from time to time. And I found that there's so much more power in the vulnerability and shining a light on the darkness because you steal its strength than there is in trying to pretend like it's not there, or like you're just going
Yeah.
to man up and push on through it and
Sure.
pretend like it doesn't bother you or I'm stronger than it is. Just
Yeah.
shine a light on it and it withers,
Yeah.
as opposed to pretending like it doesn't exist in the first place.
And then it continues to fester,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Or
Right. Or
whatever else it.
there's been times when I've made a video that from a analytical, like from an analytics perspective, sucks. 228 views, which on TikTok is nothing, right? Videos can get hundreds of thousands or millions of views, right? 234 views basically means it failed. And there's one comment. Wow, I thought I was the only one.
Mm,
And you're like, bam, that's why that video exists.
yeah.
Right.
100%.
That's why the universe told me to go make that video.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I sat in front of that camera and bared my soul about whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because somebody just realized they weren't the only one going through it.
And that beautifully ties in with the whole theme of changing, managing expectations, changing the way you look at things, where you could perceive it as, 228 views, yes, failure, or you can look at the one person that
you just impacted one human
hell
being.
Yeah. And so which one are you going to focus on, right? And that is where that's where you change your
but also the expectations. I don't care. Yeah. I'm not there to make some viral content. I have had like one or two sort of viral-ish videos, but I don't care. I don't care. I'm not there to monetize it. I'm not there to become an influencer. I'm not there to, if I do, cool. And if I don't, cool.
Yeah. Right.
If I've impacted one person with that video, that's all I care about.
Yeah, man. That's great.
And maybe I'll never know the impact. The whole saying about, plant the seed to a tree under whose shade you'll never rest, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or paraphrasing. It's like,
for sure.
Maybe that video will be seen by some internet archaeologist in 1,000 years. I don't know. I don't know. Right.
Yeah,
that's not my job to know.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
All my job was to know I felt some weird little nudge to record this video here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude,
and
so cool.
Go from there,
I really like the way that you mentioned you slip it in. To me, for like men's mental health, I love the idea that you're doing what could be perceived as like one of the most macho things, working with your hands, you got the tools out, right? And then meanwhile, you're also, it's such a complete package, because you could easily have just turned it into that masculine side of just like, hey, this is me working with my hands. You're going on the other side of the coin, so to speak, and doing something that's still strangely, I mean, it's getting better and better, but it's still somewhat taboo, especially with men, and that talking about mental health. So very cool how you slide that in there. And as you said, it's slided in there. It's very cool. So I appreciate what you're doing. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Matt. It's been great to get to know you.
I really do.
Absolutely. And yeah, we'll definitely, we'll keep up our collaboration here, over the next while, in foreseeable future. So Matt, where can folks find you if they want to reach out to you or find you on your, you mentioned the TikTok channel, but just we'll bring it home with just the easiest way to find you online.
Yeah, I am the most active currently on TikTok. So that's if you're on TikTok, you can find me at Wood and Spirit. It's all spelled out one word, no spaces or underscores or anything like that. If you're looking for the podcast, it is Crazy Day, CrazyDay. There is one other podcast called that, but it hasn't been making anything new lately. But mine's got the picture of it looks like a road going through the forest, so you can find it there. I've got, I think that's probably the best way to find me, where I'm the most active. I mean, I've got some other social medias, but I'm not really active on them as much as those platforms right now. Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably
perfect. And those are the two that we talked about in the episode. Yeah. So I'll definitely have those in the show notes. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing, Matt. It's great to have you on the show today. Thanks, and we'll definitely have you back on at some point. And I really appreciate you coming on today.
I'd love it, Matt. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.